So just a couple reminders. This is week 9, which means at the end of this week, you'll have your rough draft due for the final project. I think for the most part, I think we have a couple groups that are having some struggles with that. Are there any questions or any difficulties you're experiencing with understanding what's due over the next couple weeks here with the final project or anything? Is everybody pretty clear on what's expected with the rough draft? So just really quick, your rough drafts should be pretty similar to what you would turn in for a final paper. And the reason for that is the more complete it is, the finer the feedback I can give to you on the finer details. Sometimes I have groups or individuals that make the mistake of just turning in like an outline or something like that, a really incomplete or disorganized paper. And unfortunately, I can't give you really good, accurate feedback with that. So the closer it is to what you would turn in for a final project, the better feedback you can get, and therefore probably the higher grade that you'll get. As far as grades go, I'm not going to be too rough. I'm not going to be too strict on the rough draft. Okay, I'm going to give you a lot of feedback, but when we get to the final paper in week 15, that whatever it is you turn in, I'm going to be a little heavier on the grading, and really you're not going to get any feedback just because you should have had all that feedback by the end of the rough draft. Okay, so any questions or anybody have anything to add? Okay. All right. So, excuse me. So what we're gonna talk about today is emotional development with children. Now, your book does a pretty good job, and it gives you some theoretical concepts and backgrounds and theories that people have used over the years, and we continue to use today. And I'm not going to go into very much of them. I think we talked about last week, we talked about cognitive development, especially using Piaget's model, his theory of cognitive development. There are, like, for instance, Erik Erikson had the 8 stages of social development or emotional development. And we're not going to go through all those today. I think your book does a pretty good job at outlining what those stages are. And a lot of them we're not going to really even use, especially towards later life. So I do want to point out that the big difference between those two models, Erik Erikson's model and Jean Piaget's model, is Jean Piaget's is very limited to child development through almost the end of adolescence. Whereas Erikson's model really spans the life of the individual up through senior years and almost death. So anyway, that's really the big difference between the two of them. One's cognitive and one's emotion. And we're going to deal a little bit more with the emotional side of things today with development. So I know I usually write out things, but I'm going to try something a little bit different. I put together a PowerPoint slide. I'm not a fan of PowerPoint slides. I think they're really really uninteresting, but there's a lot of information in this, and I want to make sure that you're getting it as best as possible. All right. Any questions before we start the lecture today? Can you all hear me all right? All right, good. All right. Let me get set up here. All right. All right, so the presentation we're going to have today is about emotional development in early childhood, and we're going to be covering some of the experience of emotion in children, how they express it, how they understand it, and eventually how they are able to regulate their emotions, and how can we help them to positively and constructively acknowledge their emotions. All right. So many of you have probably had experience working with kids, or you're planning on working with children. And there are some hurdles and obstacles that we have to teaching or guiding or keeping them on task with certain things that we're asking them to do. Now, there are two things that we look at when we're looking at emotional development. The first is, and this kind of goes back to nature versus nurture, right? We point to a lot of nature versus nurture when we think of development, because what can we help as far as their environment, and what are we kind of limited based on their biological predispositions. Okay, for example, today we're going to be looking primarily at the environment, but the environment doesn't really account for every single behavior that we see in a child. Some of it could be temperament, and temperament is very much biological, or could be biological. So we may have to adjust, and we'll talk more about that on Thursday. So today is just more about the environment. So kind of keep that in mind as we see. I'm going to have some examples here for you, and we're going to talk about that. Okay. So let's begin. Let's see here. All right. So young children are really, they're on the path of emotional development from almost infancy, from the time that they're born. And this continues until they reach adulthood. The emotional experience involves really many changes and occurrences, from being aware of our own emotions to dealing with children effectively. So knowing, recognizing, understanding, and managing our emotions is very, very important part of a child's emotional development. Okay. So even though many primary emotions such as joy and fear and even sadness, they appear during infancy, young children have a lot to learn on how to identify, understand, regulate, and regulate emotions. Okay. Because they all will experience what is called self-conscious emotions, which self-conscious emotions really, they're more, and maybe if you can relate to your own self-conscious emotions, they're guilt and shame and maybe even embarrassment or pride on the opposite end of the spectrum. So in order to experience self-conscious emotions, a child has to have they have developed a sense of being separate from the world, realizing that they can feel their own emotions, if that makes sense. Okay. And this is called self-awareness. Self-conscious emotions develop until the child has developed the tools and skills to identify what they're feeling. And also refer to their emotions verbally. That's a big task that we are responsible for teaching them. They may express their feelings by being physically explosive, or even confused or inhibited in some cases. And sometimes children, they just don't possess the vocabulary yet, or the connection between the emotion and the right word to that specific emotion, which is also something that we can help them. So one of those examples of explosive behaviors that we are probably most familiar with are tantrums, right? This is why we have children of our own, or maybe even teach children or counsel children, right? Because we want to deal with those tantrums, right? Probably not so much. I have a couple of videos here I want to share with you, just to kind of gauge your thoughts and see where we are. Hold on a second. Let me get to the correct excuse me. All right. I just have entirely too many screens. All right, maybe some of you have seen this video already. Should warn you about your hearing.
kitchen. Already starting to get up.
All right. So we saw a lot of things going on there, didn't we? That's an example of a tantrum. What did you think? How were the parents dealing with it?
They kind of just kept walking away from him, and he kept following them, and they were kind of just ignoring the fact that he was having a tantrum.
Okay. And what are your thoughts on that? Is that a good idea, bad idea? What were they doing the right amount of things, or could they have done something different? What do you think?
Well, I think that he was looking for attention for sure. So I think that they could have at least maybe like given him attention, or at least asked him what he needed instead of having him continue to throw a tantrum.
Okay. So working with him, giving him tools that he could work with, as opposed to just letting him carry on that bad what we would call maladaptive behavior, right? They're almost taunting him and making it a game, which could instill some secondary behavioral issues. But absolutely, I think they had a missed opportunity. So let's look at another example of a tantrum. I wish there was just one button I could click on, and it goes to exactly where I need it to go. Let's see here. All right, try this again.
We don't have some more. Don't forget you left those things out there. Throw it in the trash can. I don't have any more peaches. Sit down. Look at me. These are dirty. I don't have any more peaches. Would you like some banana?
Zachary, Brianna, and Wyatt go wash
That's all
hands.
there is. I'm sorry, Joshua. I didn't throw them on the floor. They're dirty. No, Josh, they're dirty. You eat your peaches. It's okay, Brittany. Joshua, would you like to get up and have a banana? Miss Leslie, since you're here, Joshua,
Huh? Oh, they don't go inside. Sarah, I'll take them to the shed. Okay.
Joshua, you want to get up and have a banana, or do you want to go back to the classroom? Okay, we're going back to the classroom. I'm sorry that you didn't get a nap. Joshua, that really hurt.
All right. So what did we see happen here? Another tantrum, right? How do you think the teacher or whatever, if she was a daycare provider, how do you think she handled that meltdown?
I think she handled it well, especially since after he dropped his food, she asked if she could get him anything else to like try and get him to stop crying. But I don't
Okay.
think putting him in a room with a bunch of toys that he could throw was like the best place for her to drop him.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else? Good
And
assessment. Go ahead.
I think I kind of agree with her. She the teacher as like assisted the problem really well,
Mhm.
and I think taking him out of the room with the other kid was a good idea. So his behavior didn't get passed on to the other kid. Or that so sometimes like if one kid acts up, the other kid is gonna act up. So I think him taking him out of the other room a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah.
Absolutely. No, I think she did an excellent job of removing the child from the environment so that he wasn't disruptive to others and giving him a time to cool down. I think the only thing that I would have really, and I agree with you, Jess, I think putting him in a room where he can throw things, probably not the best idea. And we'll talk about that here as we go into how to handle tantrums and the emotional boil up is allowing them to acknowledge that they feel a certain way and using words to verbalize that. Now, we didn't see a lot in there. We don't know exactly where she is or where he is with being able to produce those verbal skills. So there are a lot of things in there that we really don't know. So it's really difficult to judge this situation. But maybe putting him in a safer environment where he doesn't have things to throw, and it's more. And this takes training. It takes training for both the child and for the caregiver to do these things right. So let's go back to back to my slide. All right. So what we saw there were tantrums, right? And as parents and educators or even therapists, many of you are probably, are you able to, is my slide showing? Or is it showing the entire screen?
The entire screen.
Okay. Stop share. I don't know why. Here we go. Okay. How about now? Okay. That looks like just the, all right. Sorry about that. But as parents and educators and therapists, we ask ourselves why children have tantrums. If they're able to talk, we say this to ourselves, if they're able to talk, they shouldn't be having tantrums in the first place. That's what our assumption is. Well, right there is the main clue to understanding what is going on in their little minds, really. They're progressing to talk more and expand their vocabulary and their sentence length. So as they get a little bit better with that, they'll be able to articulate how they feel, but that takes some training from us. But most importantly, learning to use their words instead of physically aggressing or expressing what they're feeling. That's really important too. Children may be having tantrums for many reasons, I think we have a pretty good list here. They may feel tired or sleepy after a very busy day. I think we talked about in the last lesson last week that they are essentially constantly learning, and that has to be exhausting, right? So picking up on new things at the end of the day, they may be tired. Or maybe they were unable to get sleep the night before. They're not prepared and they don't have the energy sometimes. They may be hungry, they may be angry, or they may be frustrated. Preschool children are, like the ones you saw in the video, are developing their social skills and they're just getting on the path of sharing with others. So they may be irritated over classroom stimulation, overstimulation in the classroom, or noise, or just frustrated because they can't complete or accomplish something. Or they also may be wanting attention, like we saw in that other video, right? Or being able to have and do what they want at that moment might be frustrating. These experiences cannot only be frustrating for the child, but they could be frustrating for the parents and the caregivers and the educators. And working with kiddos myself, sometimes it can become frustrating and exhausting for us too. So keep that in mind. Keep yourself in check as to what your threshold imbalances are. And you saw in that video, what did she do when that boy hit her with a toy? Did
She
anybody?
expressed that it hurt and that he didn't like it and it was wrong with him.
Okay, yeah. So she vocalized that. She used her words. Did anybody pick up on her facial expression? She wanted to scream, I think. It looked like she was getting ready to, it looked like it hurt just by the grimace on her face. But she withheld that, and that's something that we need to keep in mind when we're working with kiddos, right? Oops. So how do we deal with anger? How do we deal with like these tantrums that we saw, right? First of all, remaining calm and not raising our voice. Violence begets violence. Anger begets anger. So if we get angry, they're going to model that behavior. We need to let the child know that we understand they feel the way they're feeling, and at the same time invite them to find a solution to the problem together. All right. We might have to remove the child in some situations, like we saw in that video. In preschool, for example, like we saw, an example during reading time. Maybe the child may not be ready to get on with another activity, such as reading with the rest of the class. So in those situations, it might be a good idea to choose an area, such as maybe a corner of the room or a library, to let them go and take a break for a little bit. In this tagging this area or looking for an area that's a safe place for them to take a break from the other children is also very helpful, and keeps the disruptions down in the class as well. So we let them know that once they calm down, they can join the rest of the group. Now we see this a lot with timeout. In my practice, I do work with parents on teaching timeout techniques, and I will say probably the two biggest pitfalls I see with it is overuse of timeout and improperly using timeout. So some parents might have the child sit out until just for 5 minutes while the child is kicking and screaming. That might not be an effective use of timeout because they're not getting anything from that. They're not able to calm down. So a good practice of that is maybe putting them in timeout and letting them. I always use the magic number 1 minute for every year-old that they are. So if you have a 5-year-old, they get 5 minutes in timeout. And if for whatever reason they're kicking and screaming, I always put a clock in front of them, usually like an egg timer or something that if they can count, usually by the age of 5 they can. But once they stop their tantrum and kicking and screaming, I can start that timer, and that's usually an incentive for them to start that time and get them to cool down. So very effective stuff. But parents, as we know, parents play a very important role, or caregivers play an important role in how children express what they're feeling. Now, research tells us that how young children express their emotions is really linked to the parents' expressive behavior, right? And that's going back to that nature versus nurture that we talked about earlier. And we're looking at the environment. What are the kids picking up in their environment? So in other words, parents who adopt more positive emotions towards their children and less negative ones in their home have children who use more positive words during their interactions, and like those tantrums right there. Maybe that child will be able to grow up a little bit older and start using words. In addition, pride and guilt is heavily influenced by how parents respond to their children's behavior in bad situations. So let me give you an example. For instance, if a child had another child in the room and he hit that child, and the parent says, normal thing that somebody might say is you should feel bad about hitting that child. They're cultivating a sense of guilt, more than they are connecting and correcting to help that child embrace the emotion and deal with it in a positive way, right? So being aware and recognizing an emotion are two different things when considering you're considering young children. Being aware of the emotion means knowing that it's there, and expressing it in some way is probably more physically than verbally is not really appropriate. Recognizing an emotion is identifying how we feel and being able to name or react fully to what it is, and defining what it is that's causing that emotion. Identifying the triggers is what we like to say, right? So once a child begins to understand the role of emotions, why emotions occur, which facial expressions result from specific emotions, how specific emotions affect behavior, and even how they can influence other people's emotions, they can identify emotions on other individuals as well as themselves, right? And they're using physical cues, and we all engage in that. We look at people's faces and we can kind of get a physical cue that may be an indication that some behaviors might be present. Like, for example, if we see somebody that's crying, what do we think of? We're looking at somebody's face and they're tearing up. What emotion are they experiencing?
They're sad.
They're sad, right? So they might be hurt. We know this from experience, years and years of experience. We get that, and really, that's pro-social behavior. Okay, so pro-social behavior, such as sharing and helping, is correlated to the extent to which young children understand emotions as well. This tells us, as children are experiencing different situations that elicit a wide range of emotions, they're acquiring the language to describe emotions and learn not only the cause and effect of their behavior, but also the cause and effect emotions have. Okay, so how are they impacting others by showing emotions, and how are other people showing emotions impacting them? It gets very, very deep, right? They link the emotion to one or more words that describe what they're feeling, and as they grow older and their vocabulary builds, they're able to articulate a little bit more succinctly, right? I'm always, whenever I teach this lesson, I always think of, I did a lot of work in the military with anger management, teaching anger management classes. And it was astonishing to me. And it wasn't really later until I got into grad school that I kind of pieced it together, that anger really stems, people that experience a high degree of anger have been trained that way. It's really a behavioral issue. I mean, there is some talk, there is some consideration of temperament, but a lot of it is just learned behavior, and it's very automatic. They've spent grown adults have spent an entire lifetime of when I get mad, I throw things, or if I get mad, even worse, I hurt people. Those aren't good things, but that's how they communicate. That's what their communication standard has developed into. So being able to kind of take things back, and really you're working with them as a child. It's astonishing to kind of see how working backwards can be so effective with them. But again, teaching them to put brakes. What are my triggers? What are my usual emotions from those triggers? And how can I recognize them earlier on and use words or use alternative actions, or remove myself and put myself in a safe place so that those emotions and behaviors don't come up. All right. So really, really interesting stuff there. All right. So as professionals, we're going to be working with children, many of us, right? And it's our job to prepare the children with the vocabulary they need to express themselves. All right. We can help children recognize their emotions in many, many ways. Helping them process their emotion is really essential. And we can do this by selecting different activities, such as maybe drawing or, exercising or reading or whatever, to go through the emotion without having to act it out. So kind of picking alternate behaviors or alternate activities, even as distractors sometimes, right? We all do that. If I'm upset with something, I usually go off and play. I've got my guitars in the back. You can see I might play my guitar for a few minutes just to kind of relax, do some breathing exercises, right? Also choosing a calm place to remain at the time of the emotion. So nothing that's high energy, that might be helpful. It gives a child time to process what they're feeling, and give them time to let their autonomic nervous system really settle down. So give them a chance to think about what's happening and reflect on their behavior and emotion. And the conversation afterwards is really important for them. Role playing emotions. We do a lot of role playing, going back to my anger management classes that I helped out. We did a lot of role playing. So if we knew what those triggers were, we would kind of push those triggers a little bit and have them react appropriately. All right. Same way with children. Role playing emotions in a classroom or at home with our children really helps. They can guess what emotion is being expressed or choose themselves an appropriate emotion to display and a behavior to go with it. Some good strategies may be to use puppet shows to role play. Maybe you don't want to role play one-on-one, but you can have puppet shows. I also teach breathing exercises. Breathing exercises, I don't know if anybody's done breathing exercises, but when we get worked up, it's a natural response. We don't try and suppress that. What we're trying to do is get our body back in line with itself, get our heart rate down, get our muscles to kind of relax a little bit so that we're not so tense. Teaching those skills to kids might be helpful. And that can start with sitting and breathing. Maybe they're not quite there yet to relax their muscles, do deep muscle exercises or anything, but they certainly, we can work with them and show them what breathing can do to calm them down. And really that way the situation occurs, they're prepared to engage in those breathing exercises a little bit more easy. So earlier on, it's really helpful. So instead of having to show them how to do the breathing exercises, they already know how to do that. You just sit them down and get them to concentrate on calming down. Goes a long way. All right. All right. So giving options is really how we help children acquire the vocabulary to express themselves. And we we kind of saw that with that woman, right? When the child dropped the peaches, she gave him an alternative, gave him some options. We often tell children, use your words, right? How many of you heard that? Use your words. We've probably, we were guilty of doing that ourselves. What words, right? We don't know what words they have. And that's a great strategy, but without giving them a clear and easy example of what they can say, what's the use? How do we expect them to use words if the reason they're acting the way they are is because they don't know how to say it in the first place, right? So if you can accompany each use your words with an example of a situation. So let me give you an example. For instance, if one child out of frustration hits another child over a toy, approach the child and ask what happened. Then tell the child who hit the other one, say, can I have that child act it out and say, can I play with that toy, please? Tell them to use their words and then give them an example, right? Sometimes to be able to accomplish what they want, they might need to engage in conversation, which they might not yet be ready. So starting to give them examples about what they can say, well, eventually they'll put that in their vernacular, they'll put that into their word bank and context. So when that situation comes up, they may be a little bit more well practiced to use it, right? Sure, it is a process. It's not easy. It's not something that happens overnight. And we as parents and caregivers and therapists and educators, we really have to be aware of that, right? Again, that's looking at us and what are our expectations. So just being very patient with the process is sometimes a task for many of us, right? Also, they can identify what they're feeling and let them know if the child looks angry, tell them that he or she, they look angry. But remember, you got to really use caution with this, to only say what you observe instead of judging from your own perspective, because we don't want to create a big sense of guilt in that child. So being very cautious in how we choose our words and what our judgments are is important. What we want to give them is proper vocabulary in connection with the emotions that they're experiencing. Also, say it might be okay to be feeling that way and then move on to process that emotion. I'm going to give you an example. So in the past, when I was working with one of my kiddos, one of my patients had his brother, and he seemed very frustrated and angry. So I separated them from the other one and asked what is going on. And he told me he wanted to play with his brother, but his brother really didn't want to give him the time of day. So I tried giving him the words to use the next time he wanted to play with the child. And I told him, I said, well, how about instead of hitting that child, you hitting your brother, how about you tell him, can I play with you, please? And I had him repeat it back to me. And as we talked about it, he kind of realized that this is a good strategy, and he calmed down as we're dealing with that, right? So next time he tried that and he used his words, and it was actually very successful. He was, and that is the reward that he got. He got what he wanted, and it happened in a calm manner. So children are really quick to make those connections. Okay. All right. So parents and teachers, or parents, educators, or caregivers, or they really play a very important role in the child's development of emotion regulation and even control. So children, we've talked about this, they're like sponges. They absorb everything that their teachers and caregivers, even their approaches to regulating their own emotions and also dealing with them, especially when the situation involves children. They're looking at you, they're watching, right? The kids may watch everything, so we need to be careful with how we respond to certain situations. If we feel frustrated, we should take a break too. Model that behavior. If we can't handle the situation with the child, take a break. Okay. And then come back to that child. As you saw in that video, that woman, she got hit. It looked like she was really upset and she wanted to yell. I could kind of see her biting her lip, but she took a moment to just think about her words instead of acting emotionally. So what is emotional regulation exactly? The definition your book has, it refers to the ability to manage and express our emotions constructively while choosing effective strategies to deal with them. Feeling angry and sad and happy and guilty and proud, it's not wrong, and we must be able to live our own emotions and look for ways to deal and also cope with them effectively, right? That's what emotion regulation is all about. Thinking it's okay to feel how we feel, but being able to react in a positive way and not impulsively. That's really the model that we're teaching. All right. So now, based on this information, we can foster emotion regulation with children. First of all, as teachers or parents or caregivers, we can use positive guidance, which is showing support in a situation, and be open to listening to their needs. I mean, that's really important to us too. We have to listen to them using their words and respond to that. Otherwise, what's the point of using words if they're not getting anywhere doing that either, right? So understanding and valuing their emotions is very, very important. And that encourages them to look for positive ways to deal with the situation, because they feel that they're being hurt. They feel like they're being treated unfair, especially by their parents and teachers, right? So it's important that they feel valued and validated in all cases. Modeling is a good way too. We talked a little bit about that. We can model behavior through role play, or just the way we react to specific situations or in certain emotions. They'll pick up on this as well. Also, being consistent to the way we deal with emotions is important. Books are helpful, but and they have a variety of stories that show the children how to deal with different emotions and how also to identify them. Sometimes they have pictures of a sad person, like we talked about, and maybe we'll see some tears on that person, and that says that the person is sad at the bottom. So that's a way of labeling emotions too, right? I think I might. Am I? No. Okay. So that's that. Yeah. Interactions with their peers will also foster emotional regulation. So it's important that from a very young age, they're exposed to and in really engaging in activities with other children, especially in preschool or other early childhood programs. We want to look for that. Okay. So what are your thoughts about video games, like and exposure to videos maybe television or movies at a young age. What are some pitfalls and advantages to that, do you think?
They might not like want to interact with peers as much because they'll just want to be in front of like the TV playing the video game.
Okay. Okay. Um, yeah, and there are some advantages to video games. I'm not going to totally discount video games and saying they're bad. Okay, I think there are some positive attributes to video games. They get the hand-eye coordination, which is really important. That's important for building their cognitive skills. They are interacting with their environment. They're picking up on that. Now, what content they're getting from that video game might be important. So for example, if we have Family Guy on, a 5-year-old is watching Family Guy, they're able to see the actors doing things. And we don't have, as caregivers, we don't have a lot of control over what they're doing on the screen, right? There's really no interaction. They're just modeling behavior. And sometimes, many of us, I think, have seen Family Guy. It's not great behavior, is it? So those would be some examples where modeling goes bad. They're using videos to adopt how they their context and their behaviors in certain environments, in certain situations. So that would be an example of out of control modeling. Okay, so just food for thought. And we're going to talk a lot about video games and their impact on cognitive development and emotional development as well. All right. But teachers, they're constant role models to children and how they manage and regulate their emotions. So those of you that are teachers, you're going to be really important, especially at a young age, really at any age, but at a young age as well. Parents, they play an important role as well, right? No guessing there, right? The way parents talk to their children is really, really important. Parents that are said to be really in one of two categories, depending on how they talk to their children. The first one that we have here is emotion coaching parents. And these are parents who value both positive and negative emotions, okay? Not just promoting positive and punishing negatives. They're really looking at both positive and negative together. And building upon that, building vocabulary upon that. They take advantage of the presence of negative emotions to teach children how to positively deal with them. And they're constantly labeling their children's emotions, right? Again, building that vocabulary. So on the contrary, on the opposite side of the fence here, we have emotion dismissing parents. Now, these parents, they view negative emotions as bad or punishable, which or even toxic, even if the emotion lacks a misbehavior. So if let me give you an example. If a parent sees a child who's starting to bite his lip and show signs of anger, or maybe starts to cry, maybe some of you have either been part of this situation, or if you've seen it in movies, but a dad telling a child, don't you cry, right? We've all maybe seen that in some fashion or experienced it, which is not great. But without even having the misbehavior, the parents are just not okay with the child displaying that negative emotion, which is a problem. And because of this, they tend to ignore or even deny these negative emotions with the intent of repressing them and never seeing them again, which, anybody that has had my any kind of classes for psychology would know that suppression of emotions is probably not a good thing, when in fact displaying these negative emotions are really a good way to show them that you can deal with them even if they're negative. Okay, so that is a learning moment for them. Okay, so just in conclusion here, we're not born really programmed with everything that we need to begin to discover how to properly deal with life, how to deal with situations. It's a learning process. However, the environment and the people around us influence our emotional development and help us acquire the necessary tools and acknowledge our feelings and being able to talk about them. Children enter a confusing world and to experience their feelings, but they lack the skills they need to really regulate them. So social interactions, positive guidance, and teachers and emotional coaching parents are really key to having emotion regulation and prepare the child for what remains in their journey of their lives, and try and keep them from getting into negative emotions. Because as we know, the prisons are littered with people that don't know how to control or regulate their emotions or behaviors, right? So not to scare, that's not a scare tactic. There's a lot in between there. Maybe they're not going to be able to communicate something to a partner. They may go through a lot of bad relationships because communication is a problem. Their emotional regulation is a problem. So there's a wide spectrum of things that can go wrong. But anyway, just some food for thought on that. Okay. All right. So that's really all I wanted to cover with the emotional development. I do want to talk about temperament and even attachment, but I'm going to put that off until Thursday. I think a couple of you did need to speak with me today, so I do want to allow some time. Does anybody have anything to add? Any experiences? Did anybody have any experience with children in temperament or tantrums and how they dealt with it?
I had experience with my nephew.
Okay. Do you care to share that?
Well, like he just turned. Well, they always blame me for his tantrums because I always spoil him. I just don't like to like discipline none of my nieces and nephews, but I can say I have spoiled him, so he has gotten worse. But now
Okay.
he's in the throwing stage like that boy did in the video. He's in the throwing stage where he throws stuff at you when he don't get his way. So after that, I just said all bets is off. Like if he throws stuff, I'm gonna throw it back at him. But then can't do that to a little kid. So I had
Okay.
experience.
Well, I'm glad to hear you acknowledge that. So why is throwing something back at him not a great idea?
I mean, I put like because I'm older, so I know like he's having a tantrum, so you
Mhm.
can't like feed into it. So you
Mhm.
just pick it up, put it away, and stuff like that. But we did try like the ignoring thing. It did work at first until like he caught on to what we was doing, like ignoring him. So
Mhm.
that's what we had to give him attention for him like to like really stop.
Okay. Okay. And there's a way to do positive attention and set boundaries. And like I said, timeout is a great example. Being able to effectively use timeout. A lot of parents and caregivers and even teachers get discouraged because they try the timeout and it's not effective, so they don't try it anymore, or they're using it improperly. There is an effective way to do it, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And if it doesn't work, just be consistent with it. So there's a lot that goes into that. And believe me, we could spend like 2 days of training on how to use timeout. But it's most effective. And for any of you that are going out in the field, it's great to work with parents, because there's really a misconception that children that have misbehaving parents, they just drop the children off to the therapist, and their expectation sometimes is fix them fix them, and I'll pick them up in an hour, and everything will be great, right? That I would probably be able to teach and enforce some boundaries and communication. However, it's best worked with the caregiver that's with them a majority of the time, because it's really a learning process for both. The parent also needs to learn how to use those skills effectively, and the child needs to be able to respond. And having a professional either in the home or in the office with them is very, very helpful for that guidance. Anybody else care to share a story of tantrum?
My son loves video games.
Mhm.
He is 9 years old, and I definitely notice a huge difference in his ability to maintain his frustration levels and anger when he's playing video games compared to when he's playing with toys or his brother.
Okay, in that they're handled better or worse with video games?
He handles them much worse with video games. He loses
Okay.
his temper very easily. He gets very frustrated with the game. He'll even, act out towards me and his father, which he normally doesn't do. So we usually have to limit how much and how often he's on video games, because he just can't handle his emotions when he's on them.
Okay, yeah, and that's a very, very common thing, believe it or not, Felicia. Let me throw this out to the class. What are some and Felicia, are you now? I'm not saying you need to take suggestions or anything, but if I were to throw this out to the class and see what they think might be going on and what they would do, would that be okay?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm always looking for parental advice.
Okay.
It's a
All right.
learning process.
Yeah, yeah, it is. They don't come with manuals, do they?
No, they don't.
Got 4 of them. Trust me, I know. They're all different too. So out to the class. What do you think is going on, and what would you recommend to Felicia? So we're seeing an explosion of aggression due that Felicia thinks is tied to video games.
I would say like probably limit the video games. I don't know because my mom did say my brother had a problem like that when he was younger, but like she just limited it, and then it got like like you gotta have the video game for this amount of time, and then you can't and stuff like that, so you can't have a tantrum. But
Okay.
that's what she did when we was younger.
Okay. So better boundaries, improve boundaries. Okay, that's one.
I think taking them outside would be good.
Okay, so kind of enforcing more of an outside standards, kind of again boundaries. Like you can have certain amount of time on the video game, and but you have to go outside too. Okay, all right. Anything else?
Like, well, I don't know. Like in my other classes, like because I'm in a positive behavior support class, like for special education,
Mhm.
and it like really harps on like that behavior is like functional, so it serves a purpose. So instead, like, so he's like acting out and like being like very aggressive in that little like burst. So like maybe just like teach other anger strategies, like frustration strategies on like how to calm down without like flipping out on like just yelling and screaming, or like kind of like how you said like he started to like flip out kind of on you guys, like the parents. So maybe like try and teach calming down strategies.
Absolutely. Good job, Rian. Read on
Rhiannon.
that. What is it?
Rhiannon. Do you know like the Fleetwood Mac song?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Rhiannon. Okay. All right. I don't think I've had to pronounce your name yet. So yeah, it'll be hopefully the last time I mispronounce it. So Rhiannon. Say it 3 times and I got it. All right. So yeah, great strategy, Rhiannon. And I think you hit upon another important part there. Instead of dismissing that negative emotion, addressing it, working it, using it as a learning strategy, right? Maybe tying it in to, again, with the boundaries. Like if we're going to display, and it's kind of how I approached it with my kids, is it's okay to see these things. They're going to be exposed to a lot of things in schools and television and movies. And it's important for them to understand it's okay to see these things, but not to act that way. So maybe even tying that in with the video game. If we're going to continue doing this, let's work on alternate behaviors, and then you can continue playing, something like that. Yeah, some really great strategies there. Hopefully, Felicia, that'll something out there will be helpful. And it really is a process, and you have to pick your battles sometimes. And yeah. But the message there is tying it in into a reward system as well as a teaching moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's what we started doing. A lot of the limitations and boundaries, and kind of like trying to teach him how to calm down when he's getting frustrated. And then if he can't get it under control, then we take a break and we'll go do something else to distract. But yeah, that's definitely stuff that we've been working on.
Good. Glad to hear. All right. Any other questions or comments?
Would it be like a bad idea? Because my brothers would always get angry at each other, like constantly. They would fight all the time.
Mhm.
My mom put them in karate so they'd use their anger towards something that's useful, or like martial.
Okay, and how's that working?
So far, it's going well.
Okay.
I mean, my little brother's still in karate. My older brother dropped that after a while, but it helped them kind of focus their anger on something other than, each other.
Okay, absolutely. Now, the one thing that is great about that, now I would caution any kind of like getting a punching bag or anything like that, because it promotes the use of physical aggression while you're angry. However, there are some benefits to karate just beyond the physical realm, And really beyond, it goes into discipline. It teaches self-discipline. It teaches how to be aware of your mind and body connection. So there are a lot of if they have a good instructor, there's a lot of positives to karate with children. Now, does it work every time? Maybe not, especially if the child is a little bit more stronger willed and they're using it as a tool to get what they want. I think many of us have seen Karate Kid, right? The bad guys in Karate Kid using karate as a tool to bully other people and get what they want. But anyway, that's a pretty good strategy to do. But also talking about it with them is also important. And as the oldest of 3 brothers, trust me, I know how brothers reside in a household. I think we've probably ruined a lot of furniture in my day. So, all right. Any other questions or comments? Okay. How did you all like the presentation today? Did that kind of help with understanding emotions and how to deal with them and kind of building that into tantrums? Because that's really what we're going to see. We're going to see the ugly side of kiddos sometimes and parents' interactions with them. So I think that this was super helpful. All right. Well, if nothing else, I'm going to stop recording. Hopefully you all have a great rest of your day. Yeah, not week yet. So I will see you all back here on Thursday. All right. I'll stick around for a few minutes if anybody has anything for me.